Welcome, my friends. Welcome to Why You Are Already a Musical Theater Writer. Yes, you, a 3-day teaching series where I'm going to prove to you that the thing that you think you want, being a musical theater composer, lyricist, and or librettist, is something you actually already have and are. For some of you, that may sound ridiculous. You may be thinking things like, but I haven't written anything yet, or I've really just been dabbling, I don't have any training, or I've been too scared to show anyone my work, so it doesn't count, or but nothing I have is complete, or I've written a couple small things, but that doesn't make me a writer. And if anything I said just resonates with you directly or indirectly, I hear you and I get you because I was you, and on certain days I still am. And to be entirely upfront with you, as we go through our time together over these several days, I'm going to offer you something that will help alleviate these thoughts, fears, and mental blocks. Because when it comes down to it, we need more stories in the world and more unique voices. And that means yours. We all love this art form and we want it to succeed and get better and to be a part of that growth, and we can only do that if we do it together. This entire series will be included to the whole list today, tomorrow, and Thursday. Each of you will have the option to sign up for the continuing series through the weekend, which I'll talk more about later. But if none of this resonates with you, please feel free to ignore these 3 teaching series emails. We'll be back to our regularly scheduled newsletter-only content starting next week. And also, please pardon me for teaching with my notes for this series. There is a lot to cover, and I don't want to do you the disservice of leaving anything out. So I will be having my notes in front of me. So, we've all been conditioned to think something very specific when it comes to who is and who isn't allowed to be or to call themselves a musical theater writer. And this imagery comes with a whole host of thoughts and issues and mental blocks. You might imagine someone who looks studious all the time and pores over librettos and scores. Someone with someone rich, someone with all the wealth we think is required of being in a creative career. Someone with incredible connections or mentors, such as Sondheim with Oscar Hammerstein II. Someone who lives like a creative, always head in the clouds and way more imaginative than we'll ever be. Someone white, male, probably cisgendered, with a lot of built-in privilege. Someone who is okay being a starving artist, living paycheck to paycheck. Someone who does their art full-time and never needs a survival job or a day job. Someone who's driven to make their art come to fruition no matter what. Someone who's fearless and shares their work with abandon and who could never be hurt by any feedback they receive. The New York Times be damned! Someone who's gone to college or grad school to acquire these skills specifically, or who has been accepted to some highly regarded audition-only program. Basically, someone who has passed a set of imaginary tests that we believe allows someone to call themselves a musical theater writer. Now, we have these ideas in our head for a reason, right? These tropes and stereotypes and notions didn't just pop out of thin air. They are a part of the image that's been handed to us, taught to us, told to us in stories, time and time again. And of course, they are rooted in reality. We can't skip over the historical facts of the genre of musical theater writing, an art form that's been dominated by cis white men of privilege for most of its existence. But this is changing. You do not need to fit any of these ideas to be a musical theater writer, or to call yourself a musical theater writer, or to do any musical theater writing. That's not what's required of you. All that is required of you is for you to take your thoughts, your experiences, your knowledge, your passions, your talents, and your unique voice, and to tell us your stories formatted for the stage with music. That's it. That's all that's required of you and nothing more. And if you notice, you already have most everything that I mentioned within you. You're basically there. And during this little series, we're going to take you the rest of the way. When I was in college at SUNY Geneseo, I was utterly restless in my creativity. I didn't realize it at the time, but I was constantly doing so many creative things in music and theater, right, that kind of clouded me to this. But the reason I was restless was because I wasn't putting my originating artist skills to use nearly as much as I needed to be doing. Sure, I got to do plenty of interpreting artist work, acting, singing, etc., which I enjoyed, but it didn't spark me in the same way. Whenever I had the ability to do something that felt like writing, I always had the most fun and I got the most fired up. You know, telling a story of some kind through music and theater. Sometimes this came in the form of arranging music for a cappella, or writing skits for our musical theater club review shows, or brainstorming concepts for performances of some variety. But I wanted to be doing it more often, with more skills, and more completely than any of these unconnected little one-off ventures. I wanted to match the levels of my taste in art and the strength of the artistic fire that I felt within me. And then it struck me. The reason I wasn't satisfied with the originating artist work that I was doing was because it wasn't bringing together all of the skills and elements that I enjoyed. And the place where all these things intersected was musical theater. And what was my first thought? Well, but you're not a musical theater writer. You've barely written anything before, some crappy little plays, uninteresting music, and nary a lyric of your own. You don't know how. And that voice was almost right. It's not that I didn't know how. It's that I wasn't aware that I did know how. I grew up with musicals. I love musicals. I've seen a ton of them and listened to at least 10 times as many. I've played scores of musicals, I've read scripts of musicals, I've been in musicals, I've helped create musicals and musical experiences as a performer and a music director and an audience member. I already know what musicals are and what they do, and can therefore probably figure out how to do it, right? And to be clear, this was less of a light bulb moment than it was like a slow dawning. So I sat on it and chewed it for almost an entire semester before I did anything about it. Why? Because I was scared. I thought, what if I'm not good enough? What if I don't know what I'm doing? What if I'll never reach the level of skill that I want? What if people judge me for it? What if I'm not actually creative? What if I have nothing valuable to say? But I kept toying with the thought anyway. And in the meantime, I did a little research into what musical theater writing is. Mostly it was just a couple of books I could find through the library system, and most of it was from Sondheim talking about the process. It wasn't a lot, but it was enough of something to keep me thinking on it. And then the perfect storm arrived for me to give it a try. Okay, the summer between sophomore and junior years of college, my parents were out of town for a long stretch while I was living at their house. I was working during the day and rehearsing and performing West Side Story at night. This was over the course of about maybe 4.5 weeks. Bernstein, Sondheim, Lawrence, and Robbins. They had my mind reeling with the possibilities and the intricacies and the cohesion and the top-to-bottom storytelling that was possible in musical theater. I love West Side Story so much. It's always been one of my favorite musicals, and this experience with this thing that I'd been turning over in my mind just opened something else up in my brain. And I'd recently read about Oscar Hammerstein's advice to a young Sondheim to try writing 4 musicals as exercises, Sondheim's own curated musical theater writing and mentorship program, and beginning those 4 exercises with adapting a play that he admired. Meanwhile, I had these pockets of about 3 to 4 hours every day between work and rehearsal where I could play around and write, at home, alone, unjudged, and no one would ever need to know if it went poorly. So I took a heightened play that I love, A Streetcar Named Desire, and decided to find the moments in it that sang to me. And I began to play around with a musical sound on the piano, based lightly in New Orleans jazz sounds. And I took the play's words and reshaped them into something resembling lyrics or lyrical ideas at the very least. And every day, I would try to write a little more, not backtracking to rewrite or edit since I didn't really know how yet. I just kept plugging away. And so, 4.5 weeks later, I sat my parents down in the living room and told them what I'd been up to. And I talked them through the entire show and played and sang them the music I had written, all 20 couple songs. I think it was 23. Though I don't know if that includes reprises or not. There were a few. The songs were untrained. They were messy. They were they were true first drafts. And they were pretty okay. Like way, way, way better than I thought they would be because I understand musical theater. I know it innately. And so do you. Did I start calling myself a musical theater writer that day? Nope. In fact, it wouldn't be till after I had written 3 musicals that I began allowing myself and others to use that term in my general direction. But I took the first official step. I took my thoughts, experiences, knowledge, passions, talents, and unique voice and began to tell a story formatted for the stage with some music, with some words. I simply used what I already knew and already had, and I did something with it. Now, the big problem standing in my way was that I did it alone, in a vacuum. Remember what I said about being alone at home, unjudged? And that wasn't going to progress me. I wasn't going to get anywhere. And then I waited far too long to begin to change that. And that's where tomorrow I'm going to help you avoid that big mistake of mine and instead streamline your own journey into something far faster and far more efficient than my own. Tomorrow, we begin to write your writing story. And if you are ready to continue with this series, please subscribe beyond these 3 days as well. I guarantee you're going to want to see what's coming up. Have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow.